Good morning. Thanks for waking up. I heard the party went on till 3 a.m., so I guess you're the A-list. As my friend mentioned, I'll be talking about how corporates and startups work together, hopefully successfully and happily. For those startups in the audience, I presume most, if not all of you, are already working with corporates, large organizations, or governments. That's where the business is. And for those friends working for these large organizations, corporates, governments, I imagine you're dying to learn from startups, get energized and inspired by them. But if you are like the most of the startups and corporates that we work with, you're probably running into some small issues. I am Didem Ateş, and my teams and I, over the past 4.5 years at Microsoft, have had the pleasure to do about 1,500 partnerships in roughly 60 countries around the world, mostly corporates. And at Microsoft Accelerators, we get to see hundreds of startups around the world. So today I would like to share just a few tips around how we see these two very different but very complementary parties working well together. And I'll also touch on a few things about how we as Microsoft Accelerators and Microsoft try to help both sides and connect the dots. So for corporates, obviously they are looking for innovation, because if they don't innovate, they will die. It's a given fact. However, the challenge is there's so much noise. I mean, thousands and hundreds of thousands startups pop up every year. How do you find the right signal, the right opportunity for your innovation objectives? That's a huge challenge. And for startups, obviously, they want access to the markets, to the customers. They want to scale. They want to grow their businesses. They have their wish list of corporates or governments, etc., to work with. How do you turn those into actual sales? It's a huge, huge effort and challenge. But for corporates, I humbly believe that it really starts out by laying out the objectives of the innovation program. And for startups, it really starts out by making yourself and your product loved by your customer. It's very simple, sounds simple, might be challenging. But it's not about just the challenges and so on of this collaboration. There are some huge benefits. I mean, if it works well, when we see it working well, the benefits are just amazing, mind-blowing on a global basis. So corporates obviously provide credibility, PR, branding, distribution advantages to the startups. And startups, of course, in addition to innovation, they bring advantages in execution. I mean, a startup is like a speedboat. The way they zero in on a problem and solve it, corporates can never, ever achieve that the way startups do. Corporates are like aircraft carriers. Even to change the direction takes such a huge effort and time. So in addition to the execution, there's another thing I'll expand on. The cultural change is amazing, is so important for today's corporates who are trying to survive and, of course, grow their businesses. So if everyone helps each other, if it really works well, everyone's life is much easier and much more fun. So let me start, but how to achieve all of that? Let me start with startups first. We see actually 3 clusters of opportunities. I do want to call them opportunities, but of course, to begin with, they are usually challenges. So if you're a startup, how do you actually approach a corporate? You really need to have your target list, etc. I'll talk a little bit about that. And then once you engage with them, once you approach and then successfully engage with them, how do you actually sell in and sell more? And lastly, everything is fine, they love you, they start to love your product. How do you improve your product or service with the feedback that you get from your customer and get paid for it? Because unfortunately, that's not always the case. I mean, you will eventually get paid for it, but the delays in sales cycles or billing systems and everything is sometimes fatal for startups. We see these unfortunate incidents all over the place. So let's start with approaching the corporates. Even if you're one of the fantastic startups who presented in this place, and you're inundated with customer demand, or corporates, big, large organizations chasing you, I would strongly recommend you come up with a target list, a wish list of customers or partners you want to go after. And then prioritize, of course. Hopefully you have your company strategy, product strategy in place. You prioritize according to that. If you have 100 list of targets to go after, you prepare for 20, you set up your meetings, modify your pitch decks, whatever, do the homework well and go after them. And let's say all goes well. How do you engage? How do you engage with the elephant? Basically, in any engagement, the first step is really to understand the other party. And by that, I mean, what keeps them awake at night? What's their biggest problem? Can you actually solve it? And if you also solve it and also speak their language, scorecards, success metrics, whatever they are worried about, they will start listening to you. You will shine in the crowd. You will stand out in the noise, even if you're a small startup. And you will be started to take, they will start to take you seriously. So a good example from this is one of our startups in the London Accelerator a few cohorts ago solved a major problem for a global management consulting firm. They started small with one of the smaller offices in the Netherlands, and they really understood their customers' problems so well and solved it in such an intelligent, cost-effective way that that huge company is now rolling out that solution to all the other markets that they are present in. Fantastic success story of scaling up. We are truly proud of. The second thing is, okay, so they love you. How do you make sure they love your product? I'd say yesterday, I think Mike and the other panelists focused this on this a lot. It's really execution, really becoming their right hand, becoming irreplaceable for them by holding your promises, keeping to your deadlines, sending your thank you notes and actions and everything, following up really, really well, and speaking the same language. And by the way, that does include even the outfit, that if you're speaking with a very traditional organization, you cannot go in there really in jeans. You know, we see that happening a lot too, but I would say shy away from that. Lastly, all of those are fantastic. Networking is extremely important. I say that for a number of reasons. Of course, networking with the peers, the stakeholders that you're meeting to get your pilots running, etc., is obviously the choice, because corporates go through so many reorgs. I mean, it's proven every 6 to 12 months, your stakeholders will be changing anyway. So for that reason, you do need to network. But there's another important reason to network. I would recommend to find mentors, sponsors, advisors up the chain. So if things go wrong, they will be your supporters in that process. We had an interesting case about this a few years ago, when a startup could not deliver on their service level agreements, and the corporate actually decided to sue them. So it happened that the CEO of the startup had a mentor in the board of the corporate, and that mentor really got in, mediated, and they avoided all those litigation costs, which again could have been fatal for that business. So okay, they love you, they love the product, they buy more. How do you get them? How do you actually improve your services or products in the process? How do you make the most of that opportunity? I'd say really, when I meet with my mentees, startup mentees, or do our office hours on business development and so on, I get this question a lot. When is the right time to share my product? What if they copy it? You know, these types of typical concerns come up. I would say that's unavoidable. I mean, in this age, almost every technology or product is easily replaceable by substitutes or others. The best way is to stay on top of the game and keep improving your product. And that's only possible by sharing the product early on, getting your customers' feedback, and of course, executing on the feedback to improve your product. So once you do that, there is another very important element, which is getting paid for the sales. I'd say charge early on. I know it's not always possible, but avoid free pilots or avoid fees that are so small one person can expense them or something. We see these things happening, but please charge early on for real significant amounts. Why? Because you'll get on the billing systems early on. There are always roadblocks in those processes. You'll get on the radar of the approvers, the right finance approvers at the right time. So by the time your pilot or initial project turns into real sales, you will be already in the system, and you will get paid at the right time, to avoid any risks to your business. So that's the startup side, and obviously it's just some high-level tips. But on the corporate side, as I mentioned in the beginning, the first thing is really to lay out the objectives. Why are you interested in innovation? It's shocking when, we see so many of these examples when somebody at the top basically says, oh, we have to do innovation. Well, everybody's doing something in startup space, let's do it. Somebody in the actual execution team really needs to have the courage or the enlightenment to ask the question, great, but why are we doing it? Are we doing it to get more customers, to improve our product, to change our distribution? Whatever the purpose is, it has to be clear, really. Otherwise, it's just waste of money, effort on a mass scale. So we see, working with these hundreds of corporates, what we see is there are about 5 pools or clusters of need. Obviously, the first one is creative ideas, to reinvent themselves, to stay in the game, to stay relevant. The second one is to have sensors to the market, what's going on in various ecosystems. And as I mentioned, execution is super important, faster, better development cycles, cost effectiveness. These are all very, very valid, important reasons. And sometimes it's, of course, all of them or a combination of them for corporate innovation programs. Again, the most important thing, all the business advantages are fantastic, but in my humble opinion, the cultural change is just phenomenal. Especially in my management consulting days, when I work with some very large organizations, large clients, I'd see, whenever somebody comes up with a new idea, the first reaction, unfortunately, is how it won't work, why it didn't work in the past. It's so, it's sad, but this is almost the norm. So when these organizations start working with startups, it's truly amazing and shocking to see how contagious the energy, the inspiration, the excitement is. And the corporate employees working, engaging with these startups, start feeling creative, empowered. They really start thinking constructively, positively, and whatever the new idea or the problem is, they start coming up with their own solutions, and it's really, really impactful. So I would strongly encourage the cultural, not to belittle the cultural change element. So all of that is great. Just to wrap up on the corporate side, as I mentioned, laying out the objectives is very important, but there are 3 pillars to a successful innovation program. The first one is the design. You have your objectives, goals, fantastic. But what kind of a program, what kind of a model will actually let you achieve your goals and match your organizational competence? And of course, it's super important to have sponsors, to get the funding or the right level of attention to the program. The second layer is measurement. Once you have the goals, what are the success metrics? What kind of data do you need to track to make sure you're achieving your goals? Or what kind of feedback loop do you need to lay out for the program? And finally, the third area is implementation. We at, especially Microsoft accelerators, are a bit obsessive compulsive about having entrepreneurs run these programs. We insist that people with entrepreneurial background have to run them because they will know both sides of the coin. They will have failed and succeeded, sold or whatever, exited businesses. It gives an absolute different outlook on the program. Of course, they need to be supported by internal champions and whatever other passionate employees in the space. Another important thing is to have a single point of contact for the startups you're working with. Obviously, otherwise they get lost trying to find the right person, and it's such a frustrating situation for a small company to just try to get to the right person. And another thing, as I mentioned, is the billing, like startup-friendly processes. Easier said than done. Billing systems by itself is a huge area. I mean, they really need to be able to digest small amounts. And the corporate really needs to have that intention to be startup-friendly all across. And finally, all of this is fantastic. You've done all that in the corporate or government organization you're in. I'd say the make or break success factor in all of this is really choosing the right startup, the right technology for your program. And that's not easy. So I'm not going to try to do sales, but truly this is where we believe we add a lot of value, and we as both Microsoft and Microsoft Innovation Centers and Microsoft Accelerators connect the dots. Why? Because our heritage is obviously enterprise. We probably work with every enterprise on the planet, Fortune 500, 80% of them are our customers, the rest are our probably partners. So there's a lot of connections and strength already there during the 40 years that we have. On the other side, at the Microsoft Accelerators, we have 7 of them around the world. If anyone is interested, I can give more information after the session. And we get to see 10,000 applications. We accept 200 of them. In short, and through the Microsoft Accelerators, as well as our strategic partners like Flat6 Labs, Techstars, Y Combinator, etc., we really get to see the best-in-class startups in any ecosystem around the world. So we are in this a bit luxurious, unique position to see the whole picture, both from the startup and corporate or government or university aspect. And on top of that, of course, we are very, very tied with the VC community on a global, with the global big players, as well as the local players that are very critical for each hub, like Malta or Dubai or Singapore or Chile. So we connect those dots, and my very role as global partnerships is to actually come up with partnership models that really make it work for our partners and for our startups. It's absolutely fantastic, and I feel truly fortunate to be doing my job. So that's it. I hope those tips prove useful to both sides, startups and corporates.